Thanks for being here. So we are just responding to the press conference of the governor, the Senate Republicans, and the House Republicans about reaching a budget deal. We don't have details yet, but what we know about the process so far is that it's not focused on working families, that it's not about solving the real problems that we have for our public schools, and that we don't hear solutions around health care and mental health care and people having the access they need to those things. And so on behalf of my caucus, we will definitely have more opportunities to comment, especially as the bills come out and we get more details. But I just want to briefly respond and say we're deeply concerned, definitely concerned about transparency. We did not get details about this budget before this announcement was made. We actually still don't have details because nothing was handed out. But what we can respond to is we saw a tax cut. We did not hear any plans about what will be cut to reach that tax cut. According to staff, what was mentioned will be a $300 to $500 million tax cut when it's all combined. Where's that coming from? What programs are we cutting? What services are we cutting? What I hear from people is that they want to see better public schools, more access to health, and strong infrastructure. And if we're cutting $500 million out of the budget, I want to see where that's coming from. Because to keep a flat budget, to keep cuts, we're going to see that in how people are experiencing their state services. And so I'm deeply concerned about that. And what we see is a real priority around businesses, big business giveaways, corporate giveaways, and making sure things are easy for corporations without considering the working people who are in those companies, who are the people that we represent. And I just want to mention briefly that we each here represent 83,000 people. We should be in this conversation, and we were not. We are talking about more than 650,000 people that we represent, and their voices weren't heard in these final processes, and that's deeply troubling. So that's where I want to end, and I'm open to your questions.
You mentioned, obviously, the focus on business. They unveiled supposedly a framework for negotiations on tort reform as well. That seemed to be kind of something they hadn't really talked about a ton before, but what are your kind of thoughts on that? Have you seen any details on that?
I mean, what we've seen this year in terms of bills were undermining individuals' rights to get justice when they are wronged by businesses. And we fought against those when they came through the Senate. I believe a bill failed in the House related to capping economic damages. And so what I'm worried about is, can Oklahomans get justice in the courts, or are big businesses going to have a guarantee when they get there? And these types of caps have been ruled unconstitutional before, and I think that's what we'll find again.
I don't know if you've had a chance to look at the bottom line on the budget and what the bottom lines are for individual agencies, but are you concerned about the totals, and especially if wonder if you feel like the agencies will be able to keep up with inflation?
Yeah, we know that the flat budgets or cut budgets will not keep up with inflation, and I'm especially concerned about public education. All we heard, did y'all hear any more than the $25 million? I heard $25 million to the formula with the anticipation schools have to add a day. And we're not seeing a response to the dire need in our schools for increased investment and resources. We are still below the regional average. I understand we're now bottom in the region for per student spending. So we are not making the kind of ongoing investments needed to make progress there. I think our schools are going to feel it very hard because they're seeing cuts in federal money and cuts in state money.
Are you skeptical that this was agreed on while the Department of Mental Health budget situation is still ongoing?
Yeah, I'm deeply concerned. They literally said it's just going to stop the bleeding. That concerns me because what we have right now are cuts that have already impacted substance use treatment and crisis care for people in mental health crisis, and we don't hear them restoring that. So we're going to come back next February and fix this. But in the meantime, are we going to see services cut in our communities? Because we're already seeing cuts. Our substance use treatment folks who are seeking treatment when they have addiction problems are already cutting staff, cutting services. So where is it going to be in 6 months? I think we are seeing no planning, not thinking through the impact on our communities and our individuals who need care.
A couple one-time investments, some pretty major ones to the OU Pediatric Heart Hospital, OSU's veterinary school, and a couple others were mentioned. What do you think of those big one-time investments? Do you think that's money well placed, or?
I think what we see is they can find the money for things they want to prioritize. We do not see the priority on Langston that we need to see. We brought forward dire concerns about the capital needs of Langston and the operational needs of Langston I don't see them stepping up to fill those holes. I think we see private prison that's going to be sold to us. Okay, I hope that solves the problem, but what we're talking about are just a few institutions getting $1 billion. And so my question is, where's the investment for the rest of the schools? Where's the investment for the rest of higher ed? The numbers on the House site right now don't show much of an increase for higher ed. And I can't wait to have our subcommittee. Our folks worked really hard in their budget subcommittees to try to analyze the needs, to try to bring forward recommendations. And we don't know if any of those were met. We don't know if anything that we talked about in our previous appropriations meetings went into this final deal. And so that's a concern.
Okay, you said that, you guys didn't have input, you didn't know about this budget until the deal was just publicized now. Can you compare it to the process last year where we had these big public meetings? Do you think there was more input then?
Yeah, I mean, we had a lot of meeting. Once House and Senate started negotiating, there were subcommittee meetings to discuss those changes. We didn't do any of that. I think that leadership has pushed this process forward, and now we're seeing, I think they're answering to the governor's preferences rather than answering to the needs of the people. And what we see is an emphasis on big business, the governor's top 3 priorities, and we don't see an emphasis on how it's going to hurt people or help people.
It looks like they settled on the tax cut with a quarter point, not the half point the governor wanted, and then eliminating the bottom 3 of the income brackets, which are already very low anyway. I know that y'all have not been in favor of any of that, apart from maybe the bracket changing, but I mean, how would that affect kind of regular folks, just based on?
Yeah, I mean, those lower brackets being cut is helpful, but that also is our wealthiest folks get those cuts too. So what we wanted to see were earned income tax increases, or Senator Bourne had a bill that passed the Senate, should have been in that final deal, or sales tax relief credit. So things that are specific to income levels, because what we see again and again are these giveaways to wealthy folks. They're getting hundreds of millions in voucher increases, which we found last week. We found out those are going primarily to wealthy families to send their kids to private schools. Meanwhile, we're going to give $160 to low-income folks in tax cuts. It doesn't match up. It doesn't add up.
Going back to the mental health conversation, can you talk about how much or how little Democrats were involved in those behind-the-scenes budget talks?
I mean, I've been involved with a lot of the discussions. I would say that we have not had a comprehensive process to finalize those numbers, and the dysfunction at the agency is real problematic. The dysfunction comes from years of the governor pushing for more centralized control. And then when it came down to having a crisis, who's solving that problem? It's the legislature trying to solve it. And what I see are not complete answers, because we are not listening to those community behavioral health, mental health organizations to get those final numbers. What we're doing is adding up some spreadsheets that the governor had, comparing it to Loft, and then we're going to move forward with that number. That makes me very nervous, because I don't think it's responsive to the community. If that number's already decided, we haven't even had time for feedback from our communities about if that's going to be adequate. I've yet to get the answer on if that includes substance use treatment cuts that were made, because drug courts are closing. And that's going to lead to more people being incarcerated, addiction continuing. It's bad for our economy. It's bad for families.
And I've heard 2 different numbers say on the 2025 supplemental request. So what's the latest number you're hearing?
I think 24.7, 27.4. As you can see, I never got it in writing. So, yeah. I think what we hear is going into the next year with a flat budget for mental health. Meanwhile, we know we need to do better competency reform. I hear that the competency process is no better than it was 6 months ago, 4 months ago. The agency's being held in contempt because we are holding people in jail without getting them the mental health treatment that they need and without getting them assessed. We've already been found in contempt for this. And so now we're going to let them have a flat budget. The problem's going to be worse in a year, way worse. I think the most disappointing part is that I think we are willing to work on solutions, and we always do work on bipartisan solutions, but are we at the table in the final? No.